You wouldn't believe how many times I've had someone try to ask me to explain photography to them. I feel like it's a thing with just putting in the time to understand it. I task myself with trying to make a quick and easy tutorial, and hopefully it does y'all some good. In photography, there's something called the exposure triangle. It consists of the three main components of photography. The first thing on that triangle is aperture. Aperture refers to the hole in your lens that allows light to be let in. It's adjustable, so you could either choose to let more light in by opening up your aperture, or you could let less light in by closing up your aperture. Now, the one thing that seems to be confusing to people in regards to aperture is the measurement. You have to keep in consideration that the lower the number is, the more light it's letting in. And adversely, the higher the number is, the less light it's letting in. The second component on the exposure triangle is shutter speed. When you think of someone using a camera, what is the first sound that comes to mind? Well, that's your shutter enacting. Shutter speed controls how long the sensor will be exposed to light. Shutter speeds are usually represented in fractions. You'll see 1/50th or 1/100th or 1/2000th of a second, but not exclusively, because you can choose to open up your aperture for as long as a few seconds if you choose to. If your options are limited between the first two things in the exposure triangle, you can refer to ISO in order to brighten up the image by making the sensor more sensitive to light. Now that I explained everything to y'all, I'm going to talk about the trade-offs between each and every part of the exposure triangle. First, we talked about aperture. The trade-off for opening up your aperture is a more shallow depth of field. Adversely, if you choose to close down your aperture, less light will be let in, but you will have a much deeper depth of field. Now, the trade-off for shutter speed is that the faster your shutter speed, the less light you're going to let in. But at the same time, the more you'll be able to freeze motion. Trade-off for ISO is that when you start to raise your ISO to higher levels, the more likely you are to run into noise or grain, if you want to call it that. Now, the thing with these trade-offs that I should mention is that it all depends on what you're trying to do with your photo. Sometimes you may want something that looks not clean and perfect, but you wouldn't want the exposure to be exactly accurate. Sometimes you want something to look a little bit brighter. Sometimes you want it to look a little bit darker. Sometimes you like the idea of motion blur or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It all depends on the goal of the image. So that's pretty much it. I hope that, this was a help to people. And of course, as always, thank you for watching.